Welcome to Voices of Valor.
Thank you for having me.
Sitting here with Lindsey Elizondo.
Yep.
Yeah, multi-sport, very experienced practitioner, and we're excited to kind of dig into some things here. Why don't we start with, are you able to tell us a little bit about your story, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. So I started off as an athletic trainer. So I grew up in Michigan, did my undergrad at Michigan State, and got kind of lucky by going there. They had one of the best athletic training programs at the time. Still, it's an excellent program. But Michigan State is the only school in the country that has both an MD and a DO medical school. So a lot of our team physicians were osteopaths. And so I got this really early introduction to osteopathic medicine, which I thought was normal and just regular medicine, because that's kind of how I was trained, and didn't really realize till I got out into the real world how unique that was. So got really lucky getting into athletic training there, really getting my hands wet in the manual medicine sphere. So did that for undergrad, was originally planning on going to med school and going to DO school. Applied to school, needed something to do in the summer before I started, and one of my best friends worked for the front office of the Detroit Tigers.
Oh, wow.
So she passed my resume along, was like, hey, I don't even know if we do internships, let me just pass it along. Like, for these 22-year-old kids just graduating, we don't know what we're doing. So she passed it along, and I did an internship with them and finished up that internship and was like, I don't know about med school anymore. So I deferred for a year and then went to the Red Sox. And after being with the Red Sox in their minor league system, I really knew I loved the day-to-day. I loved being hands-on in the training room. Didn't really want to see, I loved the surgery aspect. That's what I was going to go into if I had gone into the medical school realm. Would have absolutely loved doing that, but I loved the day-to-day and the rehab, and not just seeing someone, hey, here's your checkpoint, 15-minute evaluation, you're done, or here's your surgery. Kind of looking back, I liked the rehab component. So
were you really into sports growing up?
Yeah. So I grew up, my main sport was gymnastics and then running, and then switched from gymnastics to diving when I got to high school. So I was a gymnast that was always injured, also kind of led into athletic training as well. So I had kind of an early introduction and kind of taste of sports medicine very early on. So knew that that's kind of the realm that I wanted to go into.
Right.
And yeah, never really wavered from that. Have always just kind of loved that sphere of things. And so
you started with really working within baseball.
Yeah. So worked like in undergrad, you cover various different sports. Like with that, had no intention of ever working baseball. Just liked the sport. My dad played, my brothers played. Like, it was a sport we watched as like a family, but never wasn't like, this is, I'm gung ho, I have to go work baseball. Just happened to fall into it. Got lucky, was in the right place at the right time, which has really kind of been, I would say, just the theme throughout my life and career. Just being very lucky of being in the right place at the right time. And fell into it and just loved working the sport. So yeah, went from the Red Sox to the Dodgers. So
there we go.
With them for 2 years. So yes, it's been a very good week for the sports for us. So I was with the Dodgers for a couple years. And then that's what really led me into PT school. I was lucky when I first started off in athletic training. The Red Sox and the Dodgers were two of the first teams that really had full-time staff physical therapists with them. It really was, and it was really, when I was a young practitioner, I didn't want to do PT school. It was, for me, PT was in the clinic. Athletic training was in sports, and that's the delineation that kind of I saw in my head. And it was like that for a very long time, where there were just very few PTs that were kind of in sports. Those were two of the first teams that really kind of spearheaded, at least in the baseball realm, with that. So I got really lucky that I worked with really great clinicians. And so we would I would have a guy that was injured, I would eval him, have one of my mentors look at him, and we would not see the same things. And it kind of really opened my eyes that, like, I have a lot more to learn. I came out of school like every 22, 23-year-old does, thinking they know everything and then realizing you know nothing at all. So really being with both of those organizations solidified, like, there's more I need to learn. So I kind of looked at PT school as a 3-year continuing education course. I have my dream job. I love what I'm doing. I just want to get a lot better at what I'm doing. So went to PT school after that at University of Miami. And so spent a few years down there. Plan was always to go back into baseball. I was on that track, and then kind of fell backwards again, right place, right time, into tennis.
Okay.
And I worked on the professional tennis tour for years. Then I went privately for a little bit. Then COVID happened and kind of threw everything in that world all over the place. So everything, I mean, obviously we know everything, kind of shut down with their tour shut down. So when the tour was coming back up, I was working privately at the time, and there was a lot of rules and regulations based on how many people you could travel with. So each athlete could have 1 or 2 people that they could travel with. And so it was a lot of, we don't know where we can go, where we can play, what can kind of happen. I mean, you look back on it now, and it's kind of crazy to think about like all the different things that happened and what we went through with some of that.
Right.
It was wild of just how the world changed with a lot of that. So kind of when that happened, this job opened up in basketball, and I went to the NBA with the Orlando Magic for the last 4 years. And so I've spent the last 4 years in the NBA life, and now we're here.
Mm-hmm. A lot of big brands right there.
I've been lucky. Like I said, I have been right place, right time, more places, more times than I can count. Where it's just been, I've been lucky. Been lucky to be in the right place.
So you say that the industry was a certain type of way before COVID. What did COVID really change? Like, what did that open up for?
No, more or less, kind of talking in the tennis sphere of, and I mean, with all sports, it was like this, where you travel and there's a huge travel party. There's all these people that are around. There's all these things that are involved. Of you see the snapshot of the sport and the game, and you see those couple hours. There is so much more that is going on in the background to make all of that happen, and a lot of that had to shut down because people couldn't travel, or it was dangerous to travel, or they were ill and they couldn't. People were quarantined. Like 2 years in basketball, you had a positive test, you were quarantining for 10 days minimum. It didn't matter if you had symptoms. It didn't matter.
Right.
So there was a lot of things where things got kind of turned upside down for a really long time, and now they've started to work their way out, and it's back to kind of how things were a lot of times prior to, with some things that have changed, I would say, for the better, which made us kind of evaluate some processes of how things are working, where we can make adjustments, and the things that turned out being better we've kept, and the things that we needed to get back to how they were, we've kind of gotten back to how we were. So it's just more or less in how, and that was from a tennis perspective, but kind of in all of sports, there's just way more that's going on underneath the surface than people see to really have it happen.
So let's take the World Series, for example, with the Dodgers. What do you think was going on behind the scenes in between games? Like, what's the people at home who are just watching the game, what are they missing out on?
Well, you can answer that in so many different ways.
I guess from the PT.
So many different realms that go on. So, like, if you take any sort of playoff series or any series that you're kind of going on, you've got, so baseball, that season, it's a little different on there because you're playing every single day. So you don't have a day off. Like, you get 1, maybe 2 days off a month. That's it. You're a game day every single day with that. So a lot of times mornings are off, and this changes by team. It changes by practitioner with a lot of this stuff. But you might have your morning off, and then you're going in at 11, 12, 1 o'clock, and you're starting your day, and you've got treatments, rehabs, all that stuff. Then you go into batting practice. Then you go into the game. Then you've got all of your post-game stuff, and you're done. So you might show up at 10 in the morning, and you might leave at midnight, and that's your day.
Wow.
And that's what it is. Basketball is a little bit different where, and again, every team is different. Every game day series is going to be different based on if you're on a back-to-back or a 3 and 4 or what your schedule kind of is. But the overall general theme is that you're going to have shoot around in the morning. So you'll come in, you'll have your treatments. You'll have about an hour or so of shoot around running through plays. Like, the team is on court. It's a team practice. Then everybody leaves. You go. You take your nap if you need to do any sort of recovery, any treatment, anything like that. But we need you rested and peaking at 7:30. I don't need you dragging at 7:30. So it changes, just how your day is, because your day is still starting early like anyone else's workday. But when their workday is ending and they're coming to the game to enjoy and sit back and, have a beer and a hot dog, you're just getting started. Like, that's the most important part of your day at that point. So there are so many things that are going on in terms of treatments, recovery, preparations for what you need to have for the game, of supplies, tapes, drinks, food, snacks, all of those things that are, you don't ever want there to be a lag of someone needing something and you not having it, not being prepared for it. So there's always something that's going on.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the differences between, we'll take baseball and basketball?
In what?
And just in your day-to-day,
So every sport, I like to say, kind of has their own personality with it. So baseball is different than tennis, which is different than basketball, and all in positive ways with it. So baseball, again, you're every single day. So just in terms of your treatment and getting guys ready and going, you're not healing a lot of things the way you traditionally think of healing in PT and what research kind of looks at. It's how can we patch you up and get you good enough to play, and you're going to keep making incremental process getting better and improving, or you're going to go on the DL. Like those are the two options that we have. But how can we do this to make you still perform as optimally as possible? Because that's the job, and we don't have the time to recover and do all that. And it's a completely different mindset and physiological lens that you kind of have to look through. Basketball is a little bit different, where you will play a lot of back-to-backs. You will have some of that, but you generally have off days in there where, again, you're still practicing, you're still doing that, but you've got recovery days that you can maximize a little bit more. Still much less than in an ideal world, much less than the general population, but you can manipulate some of those variables a little bit differently than you can in a sport that you're playing every day. Tennis is the most unique out of all of them. Baseball and basketball, you know how many games you're playing. You know how long you're playing for. With the exception of you might play a couple overtime games. You make the playoffs, you're playing a little bit longer. Tennis, you have no idea. If you're a good player, you need to assume that you are going to be playing the entire tournament, that you're going to play every day of that tournament. So if we go into one of the Grand Slams, first couple of days you're playing every other day, and then you're playing every day, and you better plan to play for 2 straight weeks. And if something happens, then you reevaluate your schedule and your season. But you don't know if you're going to play that whole 2 weeks. And then within that, you might play all of your matches, might be an hour. You might play some matches that are 3 hours. So what you can plan to do for your training, your recovery, everything else that goes into it, you have to have a general outline, and then it has to change dramatically every single day based on what happened. So you can't plan out as in detail or as in advance as you can with some of these other sports. So it's very, very unique in that regard with it. And it's also you don't get paid in tennis unless you step on court. So in all these other sports, if you have an injury, hey, I might have to sit out for a week and get back. Like, this is what's the best case scenario for things to happen. And there are times where it's like that in tennis, absolutely. But there's also times like, I don't play this tournament, I don't get a paycheck. So I'm playing. Like, my ankle hurts a little bit, but I'll get over it. And so you see there's a little bit difference in some of the mindsets too, which again changes based on tournament and player. There's a lot of factors there.
Right.
But just the setup of the different sports leads to different ways that people will act as well, which is it's a fascinating thing to look at from a psychological perspective.
So in tennis, you've probably had to hold some people back from playing? Some heated discussions?
Yes, and like you recommend, like, hey, this isn't great. I probably wouldn't play on this. Like, and again, if you're playing and it's the semifinals of Wimbledon, hey, your ankle hurts, but semifinals of Wimbledon. Like, what can we do? Because it doesn't matter what I say, they're not listening to me. Whereas if it's the lead-up tournament coming in, I'm like, hey, you're good, your ankle's good, you can go. I want to be good for next week. So, and it's not, and I don't mean that in a way where people are trying to cheat the system, but you have to look at those overarching things of where you're trying to peak and where you want to push yourself and not push yourself. And every athlete is going to have that be a little bit different within kind of their realm. So that changes just completely based individually and based on where they're at in their season and in the tournament. So,
So far of the sports you've worked with, do you have a favorite?
Everyone always asks me this, and no, because they all have pros and cons. Every single sport, I tell everyone, I've been so lucky. I have had unbelievable experiences. I have traveled the world. I cannot complain at all about the career that I've had. I've been so lucky. It is also way more glamorous on the outside than the inside, because just kind of like we talked about, you see that 2-hour snapshot, 3-hour, whatever that game is, no one sees all the rest of it, or they don't see, hey, we just played a back-to-back, and each night of that back-to-back, I got on a plane at 2 a.m., landed at 3 a.m., got to the hotel at 4 a.m., and I had to get up at 8 a.m. for a COVID test or for practice. Or like, you don't see all the other things that go into it, which again, they're small things that I'm complaining about, that I've had this amazing, they're little things, but you don't see all of that stuff. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. So they all have those pros and cons. I've loved working all of them. Absolutely all of them. What shocks a lot of people is that I actually like the travel in tennis better. So even though it's longer travel a lot of times, like you might be on a 12-hour flight to China, or you're playing in a tournament in Germany or Australia, like once you're there, you're there.
Yeah.
And so we're in basketball and baseball, you're on a plane every couple of days or a bus every couple of days going somewhere. And so even though you're not traveling as far, it's just more frequent. Whereas in tennis, you're on a plane for a long time, but once you're there, you can kind of chill there and you see all these really cool different places. So there's, again, pros and cons.
Are you able to talk about kind of what's next for you right now?
Yeah, a little bit. So I left the Orlando Magic after the end of last season. So kind of a caveat, my husband does the exact same thing. He is the director of sports medicine for Austin FC. So he came out here last season, started the end of the 2 seasons ago.
Right.
So he was with the team then. I still had another year on my contract, and we were kind of going back and forth. And after that year, I said, you know what, we've actually gone back and forth and been with different teams for like the last 14 years. So this is not new territory for us. We were kind of like, maybe it's time that we kind of like take a step back from some of this stuff. So I had this amazing 4 years in the NBA and said, you know, it's time for a different challenge, a new challenge. So did the Olympics this year. After the Olympics, that was my official farewell tour, which I don't think I could have scripted that much better than
Yeah,
how
seriously.
it went. So that was pretty incredible. So did that and then moved here and accepted a job with Unrivaled Basketball, which is a new women's 3-on-3 league that'll be launching in Miami in January. So it'll be just announced today, 36 instead of 30 of the top WNBA players.
Wow.
3-on-3 basketball for about 10 weeks of the season, kind of as a lead up going into the WNBA season. So super exciting. It's going to be, I'm really pumped for this to kind of take off and really expand just the women's sports realm.
Yeah, in terms of new sports league, this seems to be all the buzz.
Yeah, it's pretty great. There's a lot of just momentum for women's sports in general right now, which is great. I mean, I've worked on both sides of women and men's sports, and there can be a huge disparity in some of that stuff. And then there can be things that are really great in both, but just having the momentum and the excitement that there is, I've never seen anything like that in years of working in sports. So being able to build on that and highlight that and show that is going to be pretty great. And it's a league that the men don't have. So this is something that the women are spearheading, which is really pretty exciting and unique.
Yeah, that is actually very unique. Because when you worked with tennis, were you just working with men, females?
So I started off on the women's tour. So
Okay.
I worked all with women covering the WTA. So the WTA is the Women's Tennis Association. ATP is the Association of Tennis Professionals. That's the men's side. So I started off with the women, traveling with them, and then went private. And then I did a little bit of contract work with the men's tour. So I've done some of their tournaments as well, but spent several years on the women's side.
Okay, sweet. Well, since it's a unique sort of new experience in terms of sports, are you looking to bring anything unique to it in terms of the sports medicine side, since it's clean slate?
So, yes. And kind of how I'm going into this is we're going to have athletes from every WNBA team playing in this league. And one of the things that I really want to do is elevate the level, because you've got some teams that have great resources. They've got a lot of funding. You've got some that just don't have as much because women's sport hasn't had the same money coming in. And so they've done the best with the resources they have, but it's just they haven't been level playing fields for a very, very long time. So what one of my goals is can we elevate this base level of female athlete care, whether or not it is basketball, soccer, hockey is having a huge thing. They just announced that they're going to have new teams coming. So whatever the sport is that we're at, can we raise that level of just what is standard for women? I don't know if you remember a few years ago, the March Madness NCAA tournament, there was a picture of the men's gym versus the women's gym was like 6 dumbbells that were in there. Like, let's never have that happen again. We raise the level so that way that feeds up and everyone takes that back to their WNBA teams, or they take that back to their soccer, they take that back wherever they're going next. And everyone has this level of care that's elevated a little bit higher. So we're looking to we've partnered with some great companies to bring in some of this sport tech and new recovery technologies and whatnot, so we can really offer this amazing product to these girls that have earned it and paved the way for so many people, and hopefully can just keep kind of pushing that forward. That's definitely one of my big goals.
Yeah, on topic of sports tech, what sort of sports tech do you use in, I guess when you were at the NBA or hoping to use at Unrivaled that you can speak about?
So there's a wide range of these, and one of the things that was my program when I was in tennis was biomechanics, and we went through tons of different companies of just trying, because again, even then there was a lot out there, but it's still in its infancy, and it was even more so in those days of a lot of force plate testing, force frame, what can we get that's setting kind of our baseline, looking at some different GPS technologies of what can we get in terms of your on-court loading, or if you're in tennis, what is your on-court loading there, depending on your different surfaces. There's different foot plates that you can put in your shoes and different things like that where you can monitor not just what your total GPS is, your acceleration, but what are your differences right to left side.
Is that like Plantiga?
So Plantiga is one of them. There's another one called Load Sole. There's a few different ones that are out there that are kind of coming into the market, showing you different things that can really, it gives you not just the snapshot in the lab or the clinic, which is what a lot of these things are, and then you have to extrapolate, but that's not real life in sport. And so a lot of these things that we can, it's not a perfect science to be able to do it outside of that because you've got so many of these other confounding factors that mess up the data. Bad data in is bad data out.
Yeah.
So there's different ways that we're starting to get some of these things in there. We can at least get small snapshots of things that are happening in the sport realm and in each, which regardless of what sport it is, that we can get some stuff that's true to the sport in nature that we can then extrapolate and build on. And it has to start somewhere. And so these little areas that we can start them on and build on is, you know, those floodgates are going to be open in the next few years. Like that's going to be, it's going to take off, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
with a lot of them. So
I guess as a practitioner, what would you tell the sports tech companies out there about some misconceptions of what the products really need to do?
That's a very, I don't want to say loaded question, but it's a question you can take in so many different areas. Every product that I've ever worked with has offered something. Nothing has offered everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things you have to keep in mind, that even the things that we can measure, can we measure them? Should we measure them? Do they mean anything? If we look at kind of all of those things, a lot of these things are yes, but then you also have, hey, we measured this, it showed us some data that was good, we might be able to change it and do something with it, but there are still all of these other factors that are around. So if you just look at something as easy as, let's say, power, something like that, if we're going to take a CMJ, and we're looking at some of the metrics that are on there, you might be able to see neuromuscular fatigue, you might be able to see, but you can't see effort if that changed. You can't see, did they sleep poorly that night? You can't see, no, maybe you can marry that with some of their Oura Ring stuff, but hey, you still slept for 6-7 hours. It looks like it was good quality sleep, but they're super stressed because they just had a fight with their wife or their girlfriend or their husband or whatever it is. You might not know. There's so many other factors that go in that can change. Some of these things are objective data that you can't always measure. So it's always looking at what are the things that I can measure that are worth measuring that will give me data that I can use and extrapolate on, but knowing none of those things are absolutes. We have to look at this total whole picture of the athlete. And that's where I think, I don't want to say companies, but I think that people get bogged down in just the number and the data because we do have these amazing, beautiful data points that we can have now and build this really robust picture, but it's still a picture. It's not a full video. It's not a full, it's not full everything yet. So we're still getting there, and it's to make sure we don't forget those things too.
Yeah, you need all the context and all the details.
Mm-hmm.
As a practitioner, it's kind of your job to have the bird's eye view. I guess you mentioned your workflow is generally collecting baselines. We'll take a CMJ, for example.
Yep.
How do you actually do an intervention based off of that? Like if you were talking to maybe a younger practitioner who's never done this before, what would you say?
Well, it depends on what you are measuring for. So are you just tracking to see, hey, these are our baselines in case you get injured? We know what we want to work back to. Completely different than if you're doing a weekly monitoring where hey, I'm looking to see, are you fatigued? Are your numbers down? Are we going to catch something a little bit early? Or do we tease out any asymmetry that hey, maybe you actually have something creeping up in that right leg that I need to look at and just evaluate, make sure everything is good there? Or was it a one-off jump? So it gives you, I think it's very cautious, especially for young practitioners. It doesn't give you an answer. It gives you another question to chase.
Okay.
But if you chase that question in a smart way, it leads you to some answers with that, which I think is really good. Because again, you take the thing of, if we're looking at monitoring neuromuscular fatigue in there, hey, we see that you're trending down. There are things that we can do that we know can help you to turn it around because you have to perform and have a game in 2 hours. So we have modalities that we can do that can switch that and to really help with some of that. We wouldn't know if you're feeling, I'm feeling okay, not bad, whatever, but it's not until you get into the game, you're like, man, I'm dragging. Well, then we're too late on some of that stuff. So it's what your intention is will change that answer a little bit with it, but then there's things that you can do based on what that question is and what you find. And
I guess if you're talking to younger Lindsey, is there any education to sort of teach this stuff, or is it just industry experience, really?
Both. I mean, there is, and especially now, there is so much education on everything. You can find the answers to a lot of things that you are trying to find in terms of how to and
Right.
the reasons why. And then it is putting together your own picture of, hey, what do I want to measure? What do I want to track and find? What do I want to see? Especially in, again, I've been lucky. I've been in the professional sports realm my entire career. Like I've been lucky. There's not research there. You can't do it. Where you can in college, you can do a little bit more research, and you can take a lot of research in some elite athletics that you might be looking at retrospectively or some semi-pro things, but it doesn't always extrapolate one-to-one type of thing. So you have to take these, there's tons of educational modules out there, there's tons of research out there, marry them together to your patient population and what you're trying to do. Because it's going to be a little bit behind where you're at because you don't have that in that professional realm.
Yeah.
So.
How do your athletes like typically view the sports tech and data side of things? Like, are you ever using it to help get them more bought in?
Absolutely. So, very individual. There are some athletes, they don't want to know. It's in their head. They think about it. They don't care. Like, hey, I'll do your test, whatever you want. Tell me if something's wrong that I need to fix. Otherwise, I don't want to know anything, and they do it. There are some that need the data. Hey, did I get better than this time? Did I do this? One of the things that I think is really, you'll find this, I think, in every single training room that you're ever in, is if you are doing some of these testing, these guys want to compete against each other. They want to beat their best friend. They want to beat this. Exactly. They want to be competitive. So a lot of them want to see some of those numbers just to kind of see where they rank because they got that competitive nature. But in terms of their own breaking down some of that data, what it means, what they can do with it, very individual. Of some guys want, hey, okay, this showed me this. What should I work on? What should I do with this? Where can that kind of help me? And some of them just, nope, I'll do the test. Let me know. But I'll think too much about it. And I don't want to be thinking about, hey, my jump number was down when I got to go play and rebound. Like, I don't need that in my head. I just want to go and play. So everyone's a little different on that.
Yeah, talking to other practitioners, that seems to be the answer as far as other athletes.
But that's also one of the beautiful things about sport. It's and life in general. It's knowing your person. There's not a one size fits all. It's knowing your athlete well and being able to tap into that to get the most out of them, but then also be able to recognize when one of those things is off, so that way you can intervene because you do know them. And you know, like, I spend more time with a lot of the guys on my team than I spend with my family during the season because you're there, you're with them, you're traveling all the time. You know, not just your team, but your coworkers, you know all of each other really, really well, where you can tap into a lot of those things when they are off pretty easily. So
100%. It sounds like your husband is in the same industry.
Yes.
Did you guys meet through
We
working
did.
together?
We did. We used to work together, and then years later, a couple stories in there later, been married for almost 8 years now, so been kind of all over the country and the world with different sports, and some of those sports we've worked together, some we've worked separate. So
You guys both had to balance those crazy schedules.
yes, and I think it's one of the things that has helped, especially I've seen this a lot with female practitioners. Of male practitioners, not as much, because a lot of times they'll have a partner that can travel a little bit more, that can do things. Still not the same, I would say, on the female side. So I think that one of the reasons that we've helped each other quite a bit is we've understood the industry. I don't think either one of us would be where we are, have had the same professional experiences without the other. We've both pushed each other to get better, to learn more, to have new experiences, and that's been pretty great. So some of those things, like we started off in baseball together, and we were both in tennis for a while at the same time, and now kind of different sports and trajectories, but we've both pushed each other along kind of in that, which has been pretty nice.
Yeah. You were saying for female practitioners, sometimes it's harder to balance the family life, or?
I would say a little bit harder to balance the family life, but also I think a little bit harder in terms of the dynamic of being always on the road and traveling and not being home as much it's changing, where that's much more of the norm for women, but it's still not the same, where it's much more normal for men to do that than for women, where I think some of that you'll see women give it up a little bit earlier in their career, maybe not stay as long in their careers as their male counterparts because of some of those things, of whether or not they want to start a family, and that's a fine choice to make as well, if that's what, like, the road that you want to be on. I think that for me, my husband, a lot of the times where kind of that societal norm would have said to get off the road, I think in my case, or in just a lot of female cases where you'd have that societal pressure, I had a really great support system that was like, no, if you want to do this, you stay doing it. Like, that's fine. And that's made, I think, a big difference for me personally, just because you do still have a lot of those societal things in there. There's nowhere's perfect, nothing's perfect. Like, that's just, that is what it is. Like, that's life. So that's one of the things that I think has helped just myself and my career.
Finding a good support system,
Absolutely.
finding the right partner.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, really understands it. Where do you think the industry is sort of going? And that's midway through, almost halfway through the 2020s. Went through COVID. Unrivaled Basketball's coming out. More SportsTech.
Yep.
I
think it's going to keep continuing on all of those realms. I think we're going to see some more leagues that are popping up. You're going to see more popularity in leagues, and you're going to see just ease of access of getting to those leagues. So if you look back even 10 years ago, and you watch sports with whatever was on cable TV.
Yeah.
You couldn't go and search for things. You couldn't buy a league pass. You couldn't do that kind of stuff. The just ease of access to different streaming mechanisms and abilities to watch, that's going to open up access to all of these different sports on such a higher level that I think that you'll see a benefit to that. And there'll be a cap. You can't just, it's not going to be a free-for-all, but I do think that will help grow a lot of these sports. With that, I think SportsTech is, again, going to keep booming. Rehab, I think, is going to change quite a bit with improvements in biologics, improvements in technologies, where we're going to see some of these treatment times and recovery times start to get a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker. That's the double-edged sword. There still is physiology. There still is, you need healing time. But I think that we'll start to see that envelope's already being pushed, and it's been being pushed for years and years and years.
With stem cells?
Exactly. Stem cells, different sort of PRP injections, different things that you can do, that they're constantly coming up with these new technologies.
What's a PRP injection?
So it's spinning your own blood. So it's your platelet-rich plasma.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very safe thing to do. Generally, you'll get your blood drawn, it'll be spun, and then they will inject in place. It'll help with healing. So, but there's all of these different biologics that are just coming out and getting streamlined and getting better and better and better, that I think that we'll start to see that really push the boundaries of recovery and feeling better and turnaround for athletes. And it's only going to keep pushing the boundaries of what science can kind of do. And that's the fun part of sport as well, is kind of seeing. It's what made me really interested in get into, especially the professional realm, was, hey, how far, the human body's pretty incredible. Look at what it's able to do. And at this level, it was not only, hey, look at, this is the highest level of activity that people are doing, but it's also the highest level of recovery and of repeat performance and of injury recovery. All of that, you'll never see it at a higher level than you will in the professional realm. And that's always fascinated me. And I think that will continue to grow.
It's like the true limit testing.
100%. Yes, 100%.
100%. Just for us with Valor, we originally just talking to, the general physical therapists, in Charlottesville, Virginia, which amazing, right? Yep. But they weren't quick to adapt their technology versus athletics. We're motion capture I can use on now an iPad or iPhone. Yep. I want to use this. So that's kind of led us to get into athletics, in all honesty.
And it's one of the things, again, the more feedback that you can give. Again, there's some athletes that they don't want it in their head. But there are a lot of athletes that do want some of that feedback, and a lot of clinicians that want some of that feedback to see, hey, where can we make, you're dealing in 1% now. Where can I get that 1% edge or that 0.5% edge? Because that's the level that's making the difference here. It's not, the low-hanging fruit so much anymore. We need that 1% to really get better. Where can I get that from?
And you've worked on the private side as well. Mm-hmm. What do you think's the lag in terms of practices and technology in terms of years, or is it just come down to dollars that sports has more money in versus
the clinical side?
Yeah.
Part of it is going to be money, absolutely, because there is a big financial commitment to a lot of those things. Some of it is also, where do you see the benefit of a lot of it, where I think that you can use all of these technologies will benefit most people, where you can get data, you can get things coming back, but does not having it hinder what you can do in the general population clinic. I think for a lot of people, initially it doesn't. You can still, it's not going to change what you're doing with it. So is it worth the monetary investment that you're going to have? I would say people are starting to change that now and say, even though I can still do these things without it, I'm getting better results. I can make better decisions. I can have objective data with this, which is better for these people. It's worth putting in the monetary side of it. So that, I think, is the shift, and a positive shift for that. But I think
Right.
that's been a lot of what the holdup has been, where taking that leap hasn't been necessarily a big push yet for them.
100%. Bring it back to the athletic side. We've kind of had a running question the last few
Yeah.
episodes. So you worked with athletes across a bunch of different sports, different genders,
Yep.
different walks of life. What do you think really makes a difference between a good versus a great athlete in your experience?
There's a lot of things in there.
It's multifactorial.
Yes, it's definitely multifactorial. There's a really old adage. I remember when I first started in baseball, and it was, the best ability is availability. And I will stand by that probably till the day I die.
That's true with my fantasy.
It's true for everything, but there are so many athletes that are unbelievable. They're skilled, they're athletic, they can do this thing, but if they can't stay healthy on the field, it doesn't matter. Someone's is going to replace you. So that's one of the things that I think gives you the opportunity to be great. I think one of those things with that is there's a mental side to it, of not just mental toughness of, hey, can I play through this, or can I train harder? Part of that is in there. Some people have that, where they have that drive to train and what's important and to prioritize some of those things. But some people just have that mental advantage to see things better and be able to, I guess prioritize would be, I kind of jumped the gun on some of that as well with it, where these are the things that are important, that it's going to make me great, and I'm willing to make those sacrifices and do it. Well, especially when you get to the professional level, most of them are genetically gifted. Like there are guys that are better, and there's a disparity there, but most of them, they're at that level because they're genetically better than everybody else that's out there. They're faster, they're stronger, they're more skilled. They've got a better skill set. It's amazing. You watch a tennis match, and man, that looks so easy, but how did you just kept placing it right on the line? That is a skill, and you've got the power and the athleticism behind there to get to the ball to do that. But a lot of that, I think, comes from the mental side of all around diligence, training, and mentally being like, I've got this, regardless of if it's, I can just do it on a daily training basis, or I can do this even on my worst day. I have it.
Some of the Karate Kid,
100%.
mental. No, that's a actually very good answer on that.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
After so many years here with us, it's crazy to see too. I've seen so many athletes that have had so much talent and couldn't stay healthy, and I've seen so many athletes that were good, not great, but they could stay healthy and they got a chance and they blossomed into great players and into really good players. And it's pretty amazing to see kind of over the longevity of looking back on you don't see it every season, you don't see it on the day to day, but looking back on some of that stuff, being like, I can't believe that you made it. Not only that you made it, but then you blossomed, because people bloom at different times.
Yeah.
So just because, hey, I made it here and this is the age I'm at, that might not be the age that you're peaking at, and you were able to stick around and get to that point. It's pretty great to kind of watch and see.
I do think about that a lot with maybe I stopped playing baseball too soon, but no.
But baseball is one of the sports that, again, I think a lot of people kind of end some of their sports too early. Baseball is one of the sports that I think people have maybe made it a little bit longer because you have such a deep minor league system. So many people there is a longer life on your professional career at any level than you have in some of these other sports, just because there's more spots to fill in some of that stuff, where it's kind of crazy to see some of those guys that, hey, just can you keep grinding it out and get there?
From your perspective, which of the leagues kind of structure themselves the best? I know it probably in terms of.
Oh, I don't know if I'm the one to answer that one. They're all different, and they're different because they're different types of sports. So obviously, baseball's got a very, very deep and robust minor league system. So players can start earlier playing professionally. They can develop for longer, so there's not as much pressure to develop at an early age, and they're almost more protected. Like it's rare for someone to get drafted and come straight in and to be kind of that phenom. Whereas you look at a football or a basketball, you get drafted and you're playing right away. If you're number one draft pick, you're expected to be playing and to be starting and to be. So the expectation is much different there. That also changes, I would say, a little bit of the level of pressure on these guys. So if you've got two guys that are coming out of college, number one draft pick in baseball, number one draft pick in basketball or football, the level of pressure is drastically different
For sure.
on those two. So that can change a lot of things as well. Whether or not one is better than the other, I don't know that I could say that.
Yeah.
Tennis is all merit. You can get some wild cards into tournaments. So you can get wild cards into any tournament that you have, but if you take, a player from X country and that country has 2 or 3 tournaments, they might give a wild card to the people that are coming from their country because they want to lift up the level of that program, which might help you to get some points. But that's not ever going to make you stay on tour. Does that make sense? To stay on tour, you have to play well and earn your spot. It's not a GM or a coach or anybody that's saying, hey, this is who I want on my team. It's did you win?
Yeah.
And if you won, you keep going and you make it up there. So they're all set up kind of differently, and I don't know that there is one that's better.
With tennis, I've been trying to get more and more into tennis. Could you see there being a major league tennis within the U.S.?
Oh my God, I would love that. I would love, personally, the Lindsey theory, I would love that. They do have some of that, so a couple of different things, like World Team Tennis will do that. There is Fed Cup and Billie Jean King Cup, which is country tournaments, so your countries will play against each other, and those are yearly. So there are some things like that where you do have that team. It's almost kind of following like a college type model where you're still playing your individual match, but then your match goes towards your team total.
Yep.
Type of thing. I don't think that will ever happen in true tennis, but I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Tennis is also unique in that every player they're paying for all of their stuff. So they're paying their coach, they're paying their coach's travel, their flights, their hotel, their everything. That doesn't happen in any other sport.
Yeah.
There's no other sport where these guys are paying their coach and paying for their coach's flights and their hotel. That's all part of the team expense. And so it's a completely different just model and economic model in tennis.
You either need to have the money or have a business manager help you get sponsorships.
So there's some that are through sponsorships. There's some that are your federation. So depending on the country you come from, your federation might be very robust and gives you coaching, pays for some of your travel, pays for that. There's some federations that tennis isn't their main sport. They don't have, it's like a lot of, federations of national governing bodies within the states. They don't have a lot of funding because it's a national body. So there's a wide range in that one as well, just based on where people are coming from and what those resources are. But I would say it's definitely gotten better over the last several years, where there is just a lot more access. And truthfully, the tours have done an excellent job of providing those resources to the athletes and really helping them, especially on the women's side, of what are the resources that we can provide to everyone on tour, regardless of what their ranking is.
Yeah.
Because that's, again, you're elevating the level of everything.
Right. And so, if there was one, it'd have to be compatible with the tour almost. Mm-hmm. Like similar. Unrivaled seems very compatible with WNBA. Yep. They're not trying to wipe it out or anything.
No. And it was started by 2 WNBA players. So, their goal is to, I don't actually want to speak for them, but it's started by 2 WNBA players. And it is, let's elevate the level of women's sports. Let's bring more to the forefront. So, and it's a different sport. It's 3-on-3 instead of 5-on-5. So.
Is it half court?
Full court.
Full court?
It's it's a shorter full court.
Okay, that's very.
So it'll be a little bit different than at the Olympics, but
that's very interesting.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what have you thought of the move from Florida to Austin, Texas?
So far, it's been good. A little hotter than I was expecting, especially coming from Florida. I thought I had that down, and I got here and thought that I was melting for a couple weeks straight. But it's been the people have been incredible. I've had really great meals all throughout Austin. I would say I don't think I've had a bad one yet here, so that's been good. It's been a really great kind of transition so far, so hopefully we can kind of keep that rolling.
That's great to hear. What have you been able to do for fun?
So I haven't been here that long. So I came here for a little bit, and then, like I said, I left for 2 months and was at the Olympics. I was over in Europe for 2 months and then came back. So I've been back about 2.5, 3 months now. Tried to do all of the typical Austin things of all right, let's go find some barbecue. Did ACL. I'm going to do food and wine coming up. So trying to just hit all of the typical Austin things. I floated on the river. I don't know if I can call this a lake, having just come from the ocean. I know it is, but it's just different when you're coming from the ocean. But I've had so much fun in everything that I've done so far. So
Really which weekend of ACL?
The second one.
Second one?
Mm-hmm.
Who was your favorite person? I was also at the second one.
So Chris Stapleton, I knew he always puts on like a really great concert. I knew that would be good. I really liked Teddy Swims. That was probably the one I liked the best. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. What about you?
Dude, I definitely, I'm embarrassed to say, definitely Dua Lipa though.
So I didn't stay for a lot of Dua Lipa. I left. I was like, man, yesterday it took me so long to get out of here. So I stayed for about half of hers, and then
my girlfriend's
hit my wall.
My girlfriend's poking fun. She's like, you and all of your guy friends love Dua Lipa.
I don't know that that's not uncommon actually for a lot of guy friend groups.
Whatever. So. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground on this. So I definitely,
thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. If any of our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
They can email me. It is, I don't know what the best email to give you guys is. Do you guys have like a show notes or anything?
We can put it in the notes.
Perfect. I will give you that. Or they can reach out to me on Instagram. I am on Instagram. Yeah, on Instagram. My name is Linstagram. That's
Linstagram.
More confusing. Can we edit that?
Yeah, Linstagram.
Yeah, so we can actually put that out there for what it is. It's Linstagram and then 3 zeros. So please feel free to reach out anytime.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me, guys.